Today is January 12th, 2018, and you're listening to episode number 7 of the IoT Weekly Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of the IoT Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Gearforge Software. My name is Matthew, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Cliff. How you doing today, Cliff?
You know, I'm just trying to stay warm here, Matthew. We've got another cold chill here in Minnesota, but doing great.
That is awesome. Yeah, we had some ice and snow yesterday. Made everything kind of slippery.
Yep.
In fact, I wound up pretty much skiing down my driveway trying to get the mail yesterday.
You got a pretty slow, the slope is pretty steep at your place.
It is. And last year, I don't know if you remember, but we got some freezing rain last year, and that driveway turned into, it was ridiculous. You couldn't stand on it at all.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, literally the only way down was to slide down.
Yeah, if you're a kid, though, that's like the greatest thing ever.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. Although the snow was also so coated in ice, it was like, you could stand on it. It was really impressive. So, Cliff, what have you been up to?
Well, I think if you remember, I told you I was playing a little bit with regards to the .NET Core.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So my background is more on the Windows side, and now I've got a Mac, and I wanted to try this out. I've been working on other stuff, so I know it's been out for a bit, but it's one of those scenarios like, all right, I've got a little time to play with this. So I ended up finishing up my .NET Core project, focusing on the Linux side of things. And the biggest goal I had is I really wanted to stay away from the GUI, because you've worked with as far as the Visual Studio, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beast.
It is.
It's a behemoth.
A lot of it is. Oh my gosh. And a lot of it is GUI driven, right?
Yes, right.
Yeah. So I really wanted to focus more on that command line scenario. And then you actually use Visual Studio Code for maybe some of the coding pieces of it. So I got to tell you, I was really impressed. So I ended up doing an API, just kind of a simple put, deletes, gets, things like that, an update. And then I ended up creating an Ubuntu server and using Nginx and set up the API along with using SSH, and then set up a reverse proxy from Nginx to the actual Visual Studio, or the API, because it runs on, I think it's localhost 5000, if I'm right.
Right.
So I just set it up for the Nginx, then just went ahead and sent all the proxy and everything right over to that. And I tell you what, it was a ton of fun to do that. Absolute ton of fun.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. What's fascinating to me about this whole thing is it wasn't that long ago that when Windows or Microsoft was really like Microsoft and Linux, that was oil and water, right?
Oh, completely.
Yeah. And so it's super interesting to see how far they've come. And you know, I'm a command line guy. I love the command line all day, every day. That's my bread and butter. One of the things, I love C#. I think it's a great language. One of the things that I never liked about .NET was its dependence on Windows, but also Visual Studio. To me, I really never liked Visual Studio. It's super powerful, but it always felt like you're driving a tank inside of a tank.
Entirely. And you never knew what it was doing under the covers half the time.
I know, exactly. And the fact that, now I can spin up a .NET Core project and it's like this really minimal thing, just a few commands, and you've got what you need. It feels a lot more in line to me with the other tools that I'm used to using. Like, we do Node.js development, and it's like you get used to using NPM, and it's easy to automate if you need to do that, and which we've done. We use, and it's easy to sort of see how all those pieces connect. And now you can do the same thing with .NET.
And I can tell you, I've had to set up IIS many times before, and this was not bad at all. It was so much easier.
Oh yeah.
than using IIS to get this set up, and you could easily based off of kind of your Nginx, set up multiple APIs on that same box. So really straightforward, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, full disclosure, we pretty much use Nginx for all of the APIs that we, you know, host on VMs, and it's a wonderful tool.
It is.
It's really great.
So if you haven't played with it a little bit, I'd recommend taking a look at Nginx and trying out .NET Core on a Linux side. So it's really fun.
Yeah, it's like a brave new world.
Oh gosh. How about you, Matthew? What have you been playing with here?
So I'm gonna choose something that's not development related, because my development answer would probably be I've been doing a lot of Python. But this is more of a fun thing. So, well, I guess sure. Python's fun too, but a recreational thing is I've been playing Fortnite with my son, Callum.
Oh, nice.
He's 11. And I don't know if you're familiar with Fortnite. I think I've mentioned it to you before, but it's a sort of a multiplayer game, arena style sort of PvP game. We play it on the PlayStation. And basically you dropped onto this island with 100 other players, and you have to scavenge for weapons.
Do you start out with anything?
You start out with a pickaxe. And so you can actually, there's like a building
like
component.
Minecraft, for God's sake.
It is like Minecraft.
Oh, is it really?
Your goal is to blow people away, not, you know, not just build stuff. But basically, so you drop onto this island, you got a pickaxe, you can, you know, like mine trees and buildings and stuff to get resources, and then you can build like a fort if you want to. But for the most part, it is there's a storm, sort of a weird radioactive storm that closes in on you.
Okay.
And so you have to keep moving, basically. You have to keep staying within the eye of the storm, or you'll die. And that forces the players to come from all these, you know, outlying parts of the island into the center. And and basically the winner is the one person standing at the end.
Oh, and nice.
I gotta admit, I'm not very good at this game. I've been in the top 10 a few times, and I've been in the top 5 a few times. But my son,
Hunger Games meets Minecraft, for God's sakes.
Totally Hunger Games. It's totally Hunger Games. Callum is actually really good at this game, and he he pretty consistently, you know, gets in the top 10, and he has been in the top 2 or 3 many times, and he's actually really pretty good at it.
Wow. So how long's a session take usually to get there?
Let's say 25 minutes, maybe.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, it goes pretty fast. Once you get to there are only 20 players left, it starts to slow a little bit because there are fewer. But that storm keeps shrinking until you're in a very small area, and at that point, it's like just, you know, you've got maybe 5 people left, and then it just doesn't take very long. But that's a lot of fun.
It sounds like a ton of fun. I'll have to check that out one of these days.
Yeah, totally should. It's free on PlayStation, so
that's even better.
I know, right? And actually, I think this is created by Epic.
Oh, nice.
I was telling you that. Yeah. So that's a lot of fun. Cliff, did we get any feedback this week?
We did not get any feedback this week, unfortunately. We've had a few additional Twitter followers, but we have not got any feedback this week.
Well, thank you for following us on Twitter. If you do have feedback, we would love to hear from you. You can shoot us a message at podcast@gearforgesoftware.com and tell us, you know, what you're thinking about, what's interesting to you in IoT, or just drop a line to say hello. Whatever it is, we would love to hear from you.
Anything you've got going on, if you want to share a picture of your pet, we'll even take those.
If you want to talk about .NET Core, we're game for that.
Go for it.
If you have any questions, anything you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we would love to hear from you. And I believe we still have a contest going on. Is that true?
We do. So our goal here is we'd like to get 50 followers on Twitter. And then once we actually get the followers, then we're going to give away an IoT button from Amazon. So this is the Gen 2 button from Amazon. And if you end up boosting our tweets or retweeting them, we're going to put your name in the hat a few extra times. So we've got a slew of these that I overbought. And then they're donated to us by Amazon to give away. So we would love to hand these out to folks. Just once we get those followers, we're gonna start handing them out. And if you want to follow us, the symbol on Twitter is at Gearforge IoT. Again, Gearforge IoT.
Yeah, fantastic. Yep. Come follow us, give us a boost, and you'll be in the running to get one of those IoT buttons, which is just kind of a fun thing to play with. So.
It is. And something else I was going to share is we've got an intern, and she's going to be helping out a little bit with the podcast. And I haven't convinced her yet to jump on here to the podcast, but hopefully in the future we can get her to take part in this, Matthew.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love to have her on the show and get another perspective. So.
Oh, entirely.
That would be great. So Cliff, I understand CES, which we talked about last week, that is winding down today, I think.
It sounds like it has just been an amazing show, just like every other year, but massive amounts of stuff being demonstrated and pushed out. My Twitter feed is just chock full of CES 2018. It's just, there's so much rolling out of there. It's crazy.
Did you see the Kodak Bitcoin miner?
I did, and I think their stock shot up probably 170% overnight with that darn thing.
Isn't that hilarious?
Yep.
Yeah.
I was just totally shocked that they came out with a Bitcoin miner. That's just
yeah, absolutely. It's just funny how Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and blockchain have. I mean, everybody is really like zoomed in on those right now, even when it doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Like, I don't know that business model for that miner, it doesn't make any sense at all. I have seen companies that they have created sort of mining boxes sort of ready to go, right? But this one, as I understand it, you've got to sign some kind of licensing agreement with Kodak, and they get 50% of your Bitcoin.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Well, so I'm not sure that makes a lot of sense. But.
No, we'll see where this ends up. So I think there was something else, though, that was happening at CES 2018 that you caught on Twitter, wasn't there, Matthew?
Yeah, so I saw that Arduino is planning to hand out 10,000 Arduino Uno boards.
That is crazy.
It is. It's really cool. That's a lot of boards.
That is a lot of boards.
So kind of a cool giveaway there at CES, and I guess they probably gave those away. I'd be curious to know, did they clear those out?
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if they actually gave away 10,000 or if they're walking home with a few boxes.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, oh, we've got a few if you want it.
That's pretty cool, though.
It is.
All right. So it's time for a word from our sponsor.
Most definitely. And my question for you, Matthew, is if you had to find someone that could do IoT, or you're like, I really need to figure out a way to get this data I have into the cloud so I can really be able to understand and derive, where would you turn?
Well, I would probably find somebody who knows something about IoT, some maybe knowledgeable geeks.
Yeah. I totally agree. That's exactly the same spot I would turn it, is start looking for a geek within your network, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, and that's exactly what we're seeing. So Gearforge Software has some of those geeks, and that's what they really focus on, is how do we take that IoT technology and create those custom IoT solutions. So there's so many different things you got to think of when you're trying to come up with that new idea. There's the hardware, you've got the software, and then getting all of that into the data, getting all that data into the cloud, and turning those bits and pieces into something that actually makes sense. And of course, you've got the hackers, the nasty hackers out there that want to like steal your data and just play around with it a little bit, or even wreak havoc on your world. And what you need are some techie advisors to guide you through the Wild West, this digital frontier. And so with 2 IoT labs, Gearforge can bring any prototype to life. Learn more at gearforgesoftware.com.
All right. And thank you, Gearforge Software, for sponsoring the podcast.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yes. All right. So it is time for the main. It's time for the news, Cliff.
It is time for the news. Here we go. So we've got it's been a great week for the news. There's so many things coming out of CES 2018. I mean, across the board. It's just crazy, Matthew, how much stuff has been pushed out. So trying to narrow it down here. So the hard part too is I just didn't want to focus our main segment today on just CES 2018. So we did have to pull a few other different articles because we could do an entire couple shows on just CES 2018.
Well, and maybe we should next week.
I think that'd be fun.
Now that it's wrapping up as we record this, so I think it might be good. We could do a CES review.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Just like, here's all the various things that we've seen kind of coming out of that show.
I like it. So we actually went outside of that to find things that maybe weren't featured at CES. Maybe some of them may have been, but we're trying to pull in some different news items.
Exactly. So what do we got first here, Matthew?
Well, we've got the Raspberry Pi Zero.
What?
But there's more.
So Raspberry Pi Zero more? Or
yes.
Plus?
Yes. So this is kind of an interesting development.
Okay.
This is a new Raspberry Pi, and they've added something that the old one didn't have.
Oh, really?
Yeah. What do you think it is?
Golly, that's
whipped topping.
Yeah. Maybe whipped topping. It always makes it better that way.
Right.
I don't know. What is it?
Well, it's not Ethernet, which would maybe be nice, but.
It's not a Bitcoin miner?
It's not a Bitcoin miner. It is a professionally soldered header.
Oh, wow. Now that's slick.
It is. And so so for those who maybe aren't as technical, why is that a big deal?
Well, if you're trying to do some prototyping, and we'll make sure we put a picture of this on the blog here, or kind of where we put the show notes, but trying to connect up and do prototyping, things like that, if you've actually got to solder in your own header or your own pins essentially to connect up to the Raspberry Pi Zero, can be really hard actually.
Yeah.
Because in many cases, the first thing you're going to do is take this and couple it with a breadboard and just use some little, they come with, you can get these little pins that you're just going to pop onto that and be able to do prototyping really quick before you even want to solder. And maybe you're just doing a project and you don't care about soldering. So and soldering's not a ton of fun if you're not good at it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to save you time if what you're trying to do is proof of concept or something like that. Just absolutely.
A ton of time.
So this is the Raspberry Pi Zero WH.
Yeah, that's so funny. WH. That
is a mouthful.
It is.
Comes with wireless.
Yep.
And the H, I suppose, stands for header.
That's exactly right. It's got the header. So I think this is actually perfect for doing those projects.
I totally agree. That's very cool.
Yep. So this is awesome. I absolutely love this thing.
Well, I feel like this, that is the version of the Raspberry Pi that I will probably want for most things. Because most of the time I think you are going to want to try to integrate with something else using those pins. So makes sense.
And it totally makes sense to me. I can easily see why you'd want something like this.
What's the price? You know that?
Let me check here. I think I can find that pretty quick. Okay, I don't think it's going to be. See, I'm just
looking in the article, and I don't see a price listed.
Yeah, I don't either. That's Sun. I think it'll probably. It says to check it out, but I'm not seeing it. That's funny.
Yeah, it's not listed yet in the model, so maybe it's just not here yet.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's quite out yet.
Hopefully, it's right in the same price range as what we're used to.
Yeah, normally you can get one of these at a Micro Center for about $5.
Yeah, 5 to 10, depending. I think the regular price for the W is 10, but you can get. I think you could get one of them. There's some kind of a deal. You can get one of them for $5.
First one at $5, and then 2 through 5 is like $14.99, and then 6 plus are like $19.99.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Right.
So. Yeah, so those are available. So I would think it's going to be coming out here soon enough.
Yeah, well, I'll be interested to see.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great product enhancement.
I totally agree. All right, what else we have coming up here?
So this is some news from T-Mobile, and
really,
let's
T-Mobile?
see. Yeah, so the article comes to us from internetofbusiness.com.
Okay.
And it sounds like T-Mobile has a strategy here. They've released some information about what they're planning to do to support IoT.
Huh.
Do you want to provide some details?
Yeah. So again, I think we've talked about this quite a bit, where the struggle really is, in many cases, getting the data from the edge or from the device itself, and getting it back to your cloud. So there's a challenge, especially if you got a sensor deployed out in the field or in a factory, wherever this thing is. It just that communication piece, and we're not talking about massive amounts of data. We're not streaming a video or anything like that. We're probably sampling. We got sampling rates maybe every minute or even smaller. But I mean, those sampling rates and the packets that are being sent are just tiny bits of information.
Usually it's not going to be very much. Yep.
No. We're not talking. We're not going to be using up 100 gigs in a month, right? That's not what's going to happen. So AT&T and Verizon have both come out with essentially LTE-M technology, whereas T-Mobile has been working on an NB-IoT scenario, and they've just unveiled their network basically. So they've been working on this for a while. They've got an entire roadmap now sorted out, and what they have is a $6 per device price tag for an NB IoT plan. Because that's the key part, is like, yep, I can push the data, but what's that cost, and how many megabytes do I get? And so you get 12 megabytes at that $6 per year scenario.
Yeah, wow, and that's per year. I mean, that makes it much more reasonable. It would still add up if you have a lot of devices.
Oh, I think it's going to add up quite a bit.
But you can start to see a landscape where this, that's beginning to make sense, right?
It is.
Yeah,
yep, it is. And I think again, it's just like anything else. You've got to make sure your stuff isn't too chatty, right?
Yeah. I think that's the key here.
That is definitely the key. And in many cases, what we've seen is you probably have edge devices, and you've got kind of a server that'll take it in, and if one drops offline, or if the server drops offline, you store that information, and you can kind of bounce between node to node essentially. So it's reminiscent of a lot of the standard kind of networking scenarios here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think it's also interesting. So AT&T and Verizon have gone with this LTE-M. While this is different, this is the NB IoT, right? So two different standards. And I wonder what that means for the industry.
I don't know. I'm really, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it seems a little bit concerning to me, I guess, that they aren't standardizing around something. They didn't all meet and say, yes, we want to compete in this market. Because I think what ends up happening in these situations is consumers and businesses lose. So if you think back to previous, every case where we've had competing technologies, maybe not every case, but some pretty big cases, like you think way back to VHS and Betamax. But more recently, think about, you remember HD DVD and Blu-ray?
Oh, of course.
Blu-ray won, right? But at the time, there were a bunch of people who'd bought into HD DVD, and they had a bunch of, the discs and the equipment, and then suddenly it's obsolete, right? Completely obsolete. And so I wonder, is this actually why? Like, I can understand why T-Mobile might want to see if they could be the Blu-ray, because this is all emerging.
And the interesting thing is the NB IoT. It's typically been more the popular choice for these low power wide area networks, so the LP WANs, specifically for operators in Europe and Asia. So it's got some advantages over the GSM or GPRS scenarios.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, as a business owner, though, you want to choose, like, you want to deploy something now, you want to use one of these. Which would you do? Would you do the one where
that's tough.
It's kind of got two of the big players are backing LTE-M? Or would you go with the T-Mobile because NB-IoT maybe looks like a promising technology? I just don't know. I think it adds confusion to the landscape.
Entirely. My understanding is that AT&T and Verizon are also still on the fence with regards to NB-IoT. So they're still considering it.
So you could invest in this whole thing, and then they pull the pull the rug out from under you.
Yeah, and then how many times we talk about the Internet of Things network, right? They've got their own, and then on top of that, you've got the LoRa scenario too. So you've got a lot of different competing scenarios here.
Yeah, everybody's trying to figure this out right now. And again, this goes back to that we're in the Wild West phase, right? We don't know what the standards are going to be.
And I think the big thing though is a lot of CIOs are probably going to be looking to AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile because they're a name, right? They've got they have the name, the backing, and everything else to be able to move forward with this versus, let's say, a firm that they've never heard of. Because I've seen I've seen a lot of other ones come out also. It's like I've never even heard of that company as far as their network is concerned.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, there's the list of things that you sort of want to check before investing in a particular technology. And understanding that when things are early days, there's always a risk anyway, but especially when things are early days, I mean, things have not maybe stabilized, solidified, there's always a risk that it could, things could manifest differently than you think they will. But there's always that list of like, is it well supported? Who's backing it? We go through those items anytime we choose to use a particular type piece of software or a library, for example. When building software, you kind of have to validate that. And I feel like we're at that phase here where it's kind of tricky to know what to go with. I mean, if you're making that decision.
And you've got to figure the standards for all this stuff is going to upgrade. So if I was building out a prototype, I would make sure my communication piece is somewhat separate. I wouldn't build out the prototype and say, "Yep, I'm going to integrate this now on an actual microcontroller that I have built." I'd probably keep that somewhat separate so that way I could unplug and plug in something different.
Yeah, and prototyping I think is a different thing too because the investment will be lower.
Oh, entirely.
It would be like, hey, I want to deploy in early 2018. What do I use? And I mean, that's a tough decision to make right now.
It is.
It'll be interesting to see how this evolves.
Oh, this is going to take years because you figure they've got an entire roadmap specifically for T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, and it's going to change by 2019. So we'll continue to watch these.
Absolutely, that's what we do here on IoT Weekly.
Yes. All right.
So. If I remember correctly, I believe Gollum asked Bilbo, "What has it got in its pockets?" Did it happen to be an IoT device? Was that the correct answer?
No.
But it may have been a lab.
It may have been a lab, quite possibly. I don't know.
So tell me about the lab in a pocket.
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting article. Our intern came across this one, and so what this happens to do is it's an IoT device that takes a standard microscope and turns it into a virtual imaging machine. And I will disclose that I don't use microscopes. I haven't. Gosh, I don't know the last time I ever used a microscope. So
yeah, I'm not really 100% sure what virtual imaging machine or device actually refers to here beyond what the picture shows me.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a good picture. We'll have it on there. This comes from us from Economic Times, IndianaTimes.com. And from the article standpoint, it gives you more of the details of how they actually do this. So it's really interesting kind of how they pulled it all together.
So I see what looks like a Raspberry Pi case here, one of those wooden ones. And what looks an awful lot like a microscope, and it seems to be connected up to a 7-inch display. From what I can see.
Yeah, and so the article itself was really using this in potentially Haiti. Let's say if they had this in Haiti post-earthquake, right? Or in scenarios where maybe you don't have the capability to do the analysis that you need from like a pathologist. This one specifically is the examples around a woman possibly had a lump on her breast. And if you're able to leverage something like this could be kind of an early stage, or kind of push that out there where those capabilities aren't available.
That's interesting. And so basically what it's doing is it's allowing you to capture an image on the slide, right?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And it claims to be the world's first IoT robotic slide holder.
Yeah. Well, and the big part is now you can take essentially the video feed or the image, share it through the smartphone to, let's say, a specialist that's working remotely. And now that you've got those capabilities, almost like a telemedicine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like it's a startup. It's called Alexa Path.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, curious to see kind of where they go, and if anybody is familiar more so with the microscopes and things like that, and you're like, oh, this is no big deal, let me know. But I think this is really interesting, specifically from those people that are maybe not available within those type of areas or regions, and now you can take that image and share that out there and be able to get something faster.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it says the startup is Alexa Path. The device is the auto diagnostic assistant. And the quote here says, by linking the system with a smartphone, the Wi-Fi enabled ADA works with the startup software to share images or video feed of the slides in real time to specialists working remotely. And that was a quote from Deval Palsana, CTO and co-founder of the Brooklyn-based startup. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, I suppose you probably normally have to like send over slides, and I suppose in some cases, like, hey, I can't quite tell based off this image, I need you to send those over. But I have to presume, based off of this tech, that you've got to be able to, in some cases, be able to diagnose based off the images that you're getting from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the idea is maybe in a hospital establishment, you'd have, you'd have some system that already is set up to be able to share these with the specialists. It's just, now you're somewhere where that system doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So how can you tie in, right?
Yeah.
And that's very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Cool.
Very cool. All right. What do we have next here?
Hey, Cliff.
Yeah.
What does NYPA stand for?
NYPA. Let me take a guess here. Is it New York Power Authority?
It might be the New York Power Authority. Yeah.
I am good.
And they were in the news this week for some IoT stuff.
They were.
Yeah, what's going on with this?
And I think if the New York Power Authority, this probably is helpful because they have the massive snow dump, but they had that nor'easter that flowed through there recently. So, and now they're getting the cold snap. So this is probably hugely beneficial to them. But essentially, they were in the news specifically for using a predicts-based IoT strategy to help essentially do predictive maintenance for their operations.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was an article that came to us from IoTi.com.
Yep.
And talks about they've apparently got a 25,000 square foot integrated smart operations center. And I have to stop for just a second because the abbreviation is ISOC with a lowercase I and capitalized SOC, which is super silly. Apple has taken over everything, hasn't it?
Of course.
At this point.
Why would you not put an I in front of it?
You put an I. Well, it's actually, it makes sense. It's an integrated smart operations center. The fact that the I is lowercase is what gets me. Got the iPad, the iPod, the iSock.
Yeah.
So this is a giant, I guess, command center in White Plains, New York, where it boasts an 81-foot video wall, which if that does not conjure images of science fiction, I don't know what.
Oh my God. Do you think that's 4K and we could do like split screen Battlefront on that thing, Matthew?
That would be awesome.
I mean, how far back would you have to set to play on that thing?
Really long way. Yeah, that's just silly. I love the picture though, or the image I have in my head.
Yeah.
And so there's some, I feel like there's some gaps in this article. It doesn't really mention as clearly as I'd like to see where the data is coming from, but it seems to be exactly what you were mentioning earlier. It's predictive maintenance. They have sensors on devices that give them feedback. They're running this all through the GE Predix system, and then being able to sort of keep track of what's going on, and in some cases, get out there and fix things before bad things happen.
Yep. And I think there was an example in here of how they were able to do that, wasn't that? That's kind of where we derived with regards to the sensor scenario.
Yeah, we kind of guessed based on one of the examples what they were doing in here. And if I can think here, yeah, so it describes a case where they had some equipment and they noticed that the temperature on a motor was running high, and so they scheduled preventative maintenance, basically figured out there was a filter problem, and were able to fix that before it like completely burned up, basically.
Well, I've got to think that, like, if you can do this when you're like, hey, we're going to take downtime, schedule it for Friday or something like that, versus the darn thing going down at like 2 a.m. Everybody's sleeping. Nobody wants to be out there. I mean, that's what I'm envisioning here. It's cold. I mean, you can really then be able to do this in a much more sustained manner.
Absolutely.
And your head is straight. I mean, I've done work at 2 a.m. and it's never fun, for goodness sakes.
Never fun. Well, I think proactive is always going to be better than reactive.
Entirely. I mean, you're gonna save a lot more money if you can do this in a proactive mode.
So what I think is interesting here is that it really focuses on that sort of predictive maintenance concept. Yep. Obviously, there's data coming from sensors. We don't have a lot of information on what that is, but we get a hint, right? It says, well, they noticed that the motor was running hot. That was some sensor data that came in. And I think that is sort of the convergence that we keep talking about, right? It's not just the fact that we have sensors, it's the fact that we also have the capability now in, once we've received the data, to be able to make some intelligent machine-based choices, right? On what parts of that data should be focused on and what can be ignored, right? And it's beyond just you have some parameters and it's outside of the expectation, but we can actually start to see where machine learning could come into cases like this and begin to provide maybe better insights than humans would be able to do, even if we had all the data, right?
Yeah, and I'm guessing that GE Predix probably, I would think, might have that capability, or I would think they're probably building that in, possibly, you would think.
Well, I think based even on the name, that seems to be what they're going for, right? Like Predix seems like they're trying to brand it to show that they are, this is based on AI and machine learning. So I don't know the
Predix
details.
And ISOC, why would you not?
Right, exactly. ISOC.
Yeah, I mean, and I think you're entirely right, because the predictive. I mean, I think the first stage is you've got all these sensors and all this data, but getting it from there to their actual data center, that's the key part. And then it's just so much data. You've got to, I mean, just the volume of data is just going to be insane.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I told you in reading Satya Nadella's book, he talks about machine learning in particular a lot. And this is one of the contexts he talks about it. It's one of the things that I think Microsoft is focused on in terms of their what they're doing with Azure.
Sure.
And so I think it's interesting that he's really zeroed in on this as this is one of the emerging technologies that's going to change everything. And one of the other ones is quantum computing. Microsoft has doubled down on quantum computing, so I think it's interesting to see sort of, yes, these trends continue to emerge. What I love, though, is I think the speculation on, yes, AI will be big. Okay, I think that makes sense, but it's all speculation right now. I think it's really interesting when you could see it actually deployed somewhere.
Yep.
Somebody's using it, and not just as a proof of concept, but like we've got this 25,000 square foot integrated smart operations center with an 81-foot video screen, and it behind the scenes we're collecting all this data and then feeding it through this this software that will help us decide when to do predictive maintenance. To me, that's like a real world application and not just, it's not just speculation anymore, right?
Well, it really, because for many, many years, excuse me, we've had rule-based engines, right?
Yes.
But I mean,
yep.
I love the fact that AI can now really take that to the next level. So instead of having to have your mechanic you're going to get those initial data sets, but now you can take it to the next level with AI and really start to hone in on scenarios that make more sense and pull out some of the outliers and things like that from a data standpoint.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about anything related to machine learning is the amount of data you need for it to be useful is huge, right? So I think that's one of the places where there's a big limitation actually, is that with small data sets, predictions are not good, and we've seen this firsthand, right?
Oh yeah,
data science in the ad business.
when working with the data scientists, I think every time we talk to them is their typical mantra is like, well, we need more data. Like, well, oh my gosh.
Understand, we were doing like 2 billion sessions a month, right?
Yeah.
So and it still wasn't enough data. So we're talking about really massive quantities in some cases, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that all fits in with this. So in some cases, I think you probably talking about massive amounts of sensor data, but at what point do you actually have enough to be able to make good predictions on this?
Yes. Well, and a lot of that comes down to your models, right? How many models you're going to be running and things of that sort.
Totally.
So,
yep.
And it's on the data side. I was literally talking to someone yesterday, and they've got all this. They've got it to the point where, we've got our information. It's flowing back now. What do we do with all of this information? And they're just overwhelmed. Literally,
we have the data.
Yeah.
Now what?
and they know there's value, but it's literally at a point like, what do we do?
It's a good problem to have, though. If you've got the data, you can definitely start to create some value from it. First step, get the data.
Yep, get the data. Step number 2, start learning from that data. And I think the beauty of it is once you've got that, you can get some big wins right out the gate and then start looking for some other opportunities.
Yeah, and that's what we saw. I mean, and immediately once we built some simple models, basically we immediately saw a big boost.
Oh, of course.
As we wanted to create more complex models, that's where data scarcity became a problem. And because, you start putting data and you start putting it into smaller and smaller buckets, basically, because you're subdividing it, right?
Of course.
And that's the point where it's like, well, now we don't have enough impression details maybe to make a good prediction off of this. So, but even that first level, I mean, the boost was pretty substantial.
Yeah, and that's what I think most firms are going to see is they're going to get some pretty big wins, and that's typically what you're going to need from a project sponsorship standpoint to say, hey, this is valid. We're seeing some business value from this. We should continue moving forward.
Yeah, and companies like Microsoft and I know both Amazon and Google are also trying to really be leaders in this area, but they're talking about trying to democratize basically the machine learning, right? So you can use their products, which are in the cloud, and be able to leverage that. And it might not be as detailed maybe as building something from scratch, but it gets you there much faster, and you can get kind of the easy win, right? Using something that is maybe, I mean, I hate to say out of the box, but closer to out of the box than certainly what we've done in the past.
Well, and I agree. Trying to take that path of the custom. I'd rather take that route first, validate that you're going to get some wins out of this, and then if you need to down the road, let's go ahead. But I still think you can probably subdivide and get the necessities you need from those platforms realistically.
100%. Yeah, it's interesting.
So, okay. No, great article. This is really good.
Yeah, totally great. Yeah, these are fantastic, and I enjoy that we found some that were not coming out of CES, at least maybe not as directly. So, we'll do that next time. So, If you have any feedback for us, please shoot us a message at podcast@gearforgesoftware.com. And as we mentioned earlier in the episode, we're open to any communication. So we'd just be happy to hear from you.
I would love to hear from you. And even if you want to talk to me about Star Wars, I'm up for that anytime.
Star Wars is good. All right. So that just about wraps things up for this week, this week's episode. Now, do you have anything fun planned for your weekend?
Well, I think one thing I'm going to work on is Arduino. Of course, the Uno is it's a ton of fun. It's super easy to code and things like that. What I want to do is, in typical fashion, you'd end up doing like a CNC machine or CNC shield, and you'd couple that or connect it right to your Arduino board. What I'd like to do is take just essentially the driver, because you typically put like a driver onto that CNC shield. And so what I want to see if I can do is just take that driver and drive a bipolar stepper motor. So it's just a two coil motor versus a single or a triple. And so, and the reason why you typically use the CNC shield is if you're doing a CNC machine or something like a 3D printer. Because you've got the X, Y, and Z. So I'm just curious to see, hey, how hard is it to play with one of these things to drive a single motor?
Sure. Interesting.
So try not to get shocked. That's my goal.
Yeah. Shoot any capacitors through the ceiling.
That's a story I'll have to share later.
Yeah, that was funny.
How about yourself, Matthew?
Well, we've got a party this weekend for my wife's work. She works in an elementary school library, and I hear that it can get a little bit wild. So we'll see how that goes. I think it is a party of people who work at the school.
Oh, okay. I was in my head. I'm trying to envision librarians going wild, and
my understanding is that someone brought as a gag gift last year a Walking Dead, like one of those cardboard cutouts, and put it into the host's bed so that when he went to bed at midnight and pulled the cover back, there was this zombie.
Oh my
freaked him out. Yeah.
So are you going to be staying late or
no, we're
it always tends to get crazier as the night goes on, right?
My wife and I are we're hardcore introverts, so we'll probably be there for a little bit and then head home, but it sounds like it'd be interesting.
If there's going to be food and any good sweets, let me know how those are.
I always do. Well, the invitation did describe it as Meat Fest. And the host has been, kind of tiptoeing around. I think my wife is a vegetarian and has been since she was 14 or something like that. So many years of being a vegetarian. So I think he's not sure what to do with her with that regard. So he's like, I know it says Meat Fest, but it's okay. We'll have things for you too.
You can still come.
You can still come.
And there's like broccoli and some hummus. Here you go. Have fun. Like, no, I was thinking more of like a tofu steak. Could you do that?
Yeah, exactly. It's all funny. So we'll do that.
That sounds like a great time. I look forward to hearing about it.
Yep, I'll tell you next week. So thank you so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us again for next week's show. Until then, so long and be well.
Take care.